Welcome to the Be Ruthless Show, where we have the conversations that other people don't, the conversations that other people won't. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and I'm ready to make a lot of noise and disrupt things, ruthlessly. Thanks for being here today. Now let's get to it. Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your Ruth. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Mitch Lyons, who traded the courtroom of a trial lawyer advocating for clients for a basketball court as a coach, advocating for children. A veteran coach of over 2 decades, he has been coaching at every type of level where kids play sports, community and travel teams, AAU for 8 years, boys and girls high school basketball for another 8 years, and for 3 years as an assistant coach on a men's D3 college team. Since 2000, he has founded and served as president of 2 Massachusetts nonprofits. GetPsychedSports.org is an educational advocacy group with a mission to advocate for changing the structure of the public school sports teams that institutionalize a power imbalance between coach and student. He also founded and served as president the Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts, an educational advocacy group of over 4,000 members dedicated to advancing the teaching of social and emotional skills in all settings. Made up of largely teachers and school-based mental health professionals, this organization is now being mirrored in 22 states. Mr. Lyons has been married to his wife, Joanne, for 52 years and doesn't know why she has put up with him for that long. He was lucky enough to play full court basketball until he was 65. Both his daughter and son were point guards and captains of their respective high school teams. His daughter had an emotionally abusive coach, which had Mitch reimagining what public school sports could actually teach children. Thank you so much for being here. This is an important conversation.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Ruth. Ruthless. Samantha, nice to meet you.
You too. There are so many conversations connected to sports. I played sports, and it's supposed to be fun.
And it can be. And it certainly, I've had a lot of fun on our teams, and so have the kids, because we focus more on the process than the results, as you know, honestly, good teams do. And at the same time, you can't get a child to do something out of fear and motivation for long. At first, of course, fear is a great motivator by yelling and screaming, but it's really anti-science. And that's my public schools is now condoning anti-science teaching by allowing sports teams to have coaches that are not encouraging, nurturing, supportive, because science has already shown, every behavioral science has shown, that people perform better in that kind of positive, safe, and supportive environment. In Massachusetts, there's a whole safe and supportive schools frameworks, but it doesn't apply to sports, because sports has a history of being in charge and not allowing change to happen like all of other subjects in school. It's extracurricular, which I guess means without any guidelines whatsoever, and every coach can do what they want. I guess that's extracurricular, but that's clearly not what should be happening today. Obedience is no longer considered, blind obedience is no longer considered an attribute in an employee. We want critical thinkers, decision makers, and problem solvers. That's what employers are looking for. We're not providing sports as a tool to learn how to get along with others. In fact, it has a habit, because of its institutionalized nature, to attract abusers, because there's no rules. There are no rules. Well, I guess, criminal behavior, there's a rule about that, but no proactive method is used in schools to control sports, which is why they're always liable in lawsuits, because they'll say to the administrator, tell me what you've been doing to supervise coaches. You know, I rely on my athletic director, and you ask the athletic director, I rely on my coaches. There is no written document about it. Seems odd and out of place in today's public schools, and we've been advocating in Massachusetts, and as an example, honestly, for the nation, in having departments of education involved in sports, which it just hasn't been in 50 states. 50 states, not one DOE is involved in sports except in some minor way. And, you know, in Massachusetts, the anti-bullying law includes athletic coaches.
That's amazing.
So I'm saying, well, let's put some meat on that. It's not a mandate to schools, by the way, the legislation, which is an act to remodel public school athletics through social emotional learning. And it's too bad you can't have a graph on this, but if we go to endabusivecoaching.org and see the problems and solutions page, underneath, if you just lay your mouse on top of that, there's going to be a model team. And it shows the kinds of things that are going to be taught, like recognition of thought and all of the different things that goes with that, including for sports, like anticipation skills. That's a mental thing. I see something ahead of time. And that's one of the many mental skills there are. But we're talking about thought recognition, relationship building, a written curriculum that addresses racism, misogyny, homophobia, and then some key ones for coaches is focus. I always love that one, where coaches yell out focus, and I'm waiting for the kids to say, actually, you've never taught us how to focus, coach. I have no idea. I can't do it in a classroom, and I certainly can't do it with all the distractions of a game being played. That's intense. So, and also the other thing is, you know, I want to see more effort out there. Well, coach, how do I do that? So there's all kinds of skills that teach you how to give yourself maximum effort. All of them, unsurprisingly, take practice, as does all of sports. But then the coaches should be a facilitator and not a dictator, and, you know, create these safe spaces. And the last one is a student voice. Like, students should be making significant chances, given significant chances to operate the team, like give people assignments. What's our weaknesses? Let's plan a practice. You do it with 3 other people, work together as a team, which we are, and come up with our practice for this. And I'll review it with you as a coach and see how that's going. I need to give you, as a coach, safe space to speak out and not be worried that I'll get mad at you. Mad should not ever enter into the equation. And I think it will reduce a lot of anxiety involved, not only from the student, obviously not knowing what's going to happen or what the coach's role is or what they're thinking. All of that causes anxiety, where if you had a curriculum, everyone would know each other's role. Then they would take it. This guy is not going to yell at me, because the whole focus, the center, is creating positive team climate. I can only do that if I'm not yelling at you, right? So it will have an effect on what I would say, one bad coach in every school. I mean, if you go into a school and you ask a student, who's the coach you don't want to play for? They'll always have an answer. That's the coach that we're talking about. And it's because it's just, I don't know, it's uncontrollable because there is no system.
I love that you mentioned team and relationship building. How much emphasis is there on winning, right? My niece had, she's a gymnast. She's a great gymnast. She doesn't lose often. And a week or so ago, she had her worst beam performance ever. And
Happens,
it happens. It's
right?
not often talked about, right? She still had to get back out there and have X number of events. She ended
Right.
up doing great. But there's so many coaches, hers is not one of them, that just push you to get back out there and not talk about, I messed up. I felt awful. I didn't want to get back out there. She got to talk about all of that. And she's specifically, my brother and his ex-wife, they did a lot of research on finding a program that emphasizes fun, that allows the kids to talk about the days they're anxious, the days they're struggling. I don't think all programs do that.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Of course, the higher you go, the more emphasis there is in winning. Because the coach's livelihood may very well depend on how many wins he gets. So that is good that your family looked into the matter at all. Most do not. They should. And the first question is this guy tough to play for? Or is this woman tough to play for? And ask other members. Just that one question is going to give you your answer. If the answer is yes, the idea that you can't be accountable and demanding of people without yelling and screaming and demeaning and humiliating people or weight shaming or all kinds of different things that happen is ridiculous. You can definitely be as demanding. Personally, I love competition, which is why in my bio I played till I was 65 years old. Honestly, 3 times a week. Amazingly, I'm paying for it, of course, at 76, but wouldn't have missed it. Every friend of mine once said, every game's a blessing. And I was able to play, and I'm very competitive, and I love it. I love banging bodies. I like, the physicality of it. But it doesn't mean that you have to instruct people in a way that is the antithesis of fun, where it
Right.
becomes a chore. I would go into different practices when asked to, and within, 4 minutes, I could tell whether this was a positive place or not, just in the practice.
Okay, so there's that one question. Is this person difficult to play for? What else in those 4 minutes should people look for?
Positive encouragement, as opposed to what a lot of coaches do is just criticize during a drill what you didn't do right. It's okay. But, there was John Wooden, is a famous coach, and people talk about for UCLA, won so many basketball championships. And he would have, there was a 4-to-1 rule. And it was 4 constructive things, positive things to say before a constructive criticism. And that, interestingly, was for the starters. For the bench players, it was 10-to-1.
I love that.
So he had the right idea. I mean, that is part of what could be taught in high schools.
This is really important. That's huge. I'm internally motivated. I came home and did my homework myself. I have always been a good student, and I love you, Dad. I know you're going to listen. I had the dad and I probably got 1 B in my life. I really, really am not the kid who academically ever struggled. I have the dad that if I had 105 great comments and 1 negative, he saw the 1 negative. Now imagine the student who struggled and had that parent and that coach that would be devastated by those comments. So 4-to-1, 4 amazing things and 1, I didn't grow up. I mean, I got that 1 and I heard it for months and I had an amazing report card. So
months is good.
Teachers, coaches,
months is good. I've heard my father's voice in my head for my whole life. It's a terrible affliction, believe me. Yeah, the comments stay with you because we expect something from people we trust, and this is not just in sports. Obviously, there's abuses in every single facet of life, and we're failing to really recognize those, except to shake our heads in disbelief and then not do anything about it. I'm not a I was a
People
plaintiff
respond to
lawyer.
praise. Employers out, people just respond. So you're giving that performance report once a year, and you have to bring up areas they can improve. Give 4 areas they're doing well, and then bring up where they can do better.
Totally, but also on a daily basis. When somebody does a
Absolutely.
good job, a lot of praise. This helps build team chemistry, and between players, when that happens, it builds relationships. This person is really supportive of me, and that's the basis of trust in relationships. So yeah, this is not, a namby-pamby idea, what they love to say. I don't even know what that means, to tell you the truth. But people think of it, everybody gets a trophy. Well, of course, some people have asthma and they deserve a trophy for just showing up because they're risking pain and discomfort just to be part of something. But also, everyone deserves praise for participating. A lot of people don't at all. They sit back and are, maybe because of having dads like ours, we lose confidence. I should have married you. You're just like my wife. She excelled in everything. I stayed back a grade. She skipped a grade. And my son is sort of like that, and I had to struggle. Son and daughter are like that, but I've always had to struggle. I never got a real interest until law school in what I was studying. That was really the problem. There was no engagement, and also plenty of critiques because and not enough encouragement, and that you can do this. So that kind of teaching is really out of style. I mean, I'm talking about 60 years ago when I was still in school. So that's a while. Things have changed, but not sports. That's the only thing that hasn't changed, honestly. And speaking from my heart, it's the people who object to the change are the problem. They're the ones that want this unanswered thing to go on. Even the Attorney General, who is now the governor of Massachusetts, created a conference while she was Attorney General last fall to address the hate and bias so prevalent on sports teams and in the stands, et cetera. And she had a conference, and it wasn't to discuss ideas. That was predetermined. The result was more training. Well, training is they're all got training in this. It's also common sense. It's also human decency. I mean, they know what's right. So more training is not going to really help. It's really, and more convincing is not going to help. What we have to do is a much more, an offering from a reputable place like the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Massachusetts is, which is our DOE, phenomenal. And people look to them across the country, honestly, in all of their different work in social emotional learning, where they have these guidelines, but just not for sports teams. And I believe that they are receptive to it. I never heard them say that they didn't agree with one thing I was saying, but it's not done. DOEs don't actually get involved in sports. I said, well, mental health of students is being hurt. You care about that. Why are you allowing it to continue? Well, their answer is we can neither support nor oppose any legislation dealing with this. And I know the people in there, and highly intelligent and competent and really know their stuff. And I'm sure they'll do a hell of a job of publishing guidelines for this part of school life. So we're trying to change two things. One, get DOE involved, get the departments in each state involved in sports because harm is being done. And two, change the model of a sports team, which now has only two pillars: all-powerful coach, voiceless students, and add a third, a written curriculum. And this would be a guideline to do that if they so choose to do it. And when they do, they get rid of a lot of their problems. If they just do that simple thing, but change, there's a thing called the inertia of the status quo. And it's operational, definitely, and has been in sports. Just a matter of interest, maybe to some of your viewers. The history is in 1903, a fellow by the name, a doctor, medical doctor, Luther Halsey Gulick, G-U-L-I-C-K, was the first physical activity director for the city of New York. And that included both physical activity, that's phys ed, and sports, competitive sports, which they launched there. And the league is still operating 123 years later, 120 years later, actually, to the Public School Athletic League, PSAL. It's very famous in New York. And that model was used by cities all across the country as it exploded with popularity because it's competition is fun. So while physical activity got a curriculum to teach in schools, sports did not. And my belief is it's caused by this classism that used to be around, and I believe still is, that people who work with their hands is not as bright or intelligent as people who sit behind a desk, which of course is absurd. But there's actually a great book by Mike Rose called Men at Work. And it's all of the incredible intelligence it requires to do with your hands when you're working at any craft, anything. It's there's a lot of learning going on. And I think that's, when I was going to school, there was the dumb jock, which I guess somebody told me was still being used. Of course, there's all these sciences now around sports that weren't around 123 years ago. Sports psychology, of course, is one, and one that's getting a lot of popular press because it involves celebrities. In this celebrity, you got to have a gimmick world. That's why it's receiving attention. But the social emotional learning mirrors all of the findings in sports psychology. Same thing. They're almost identical. In fact, we're employing someone to write a paper on showing how they're really the same, and where they differentiate is the emphasis on the performance piece in sports psychology as opposed to the process piece, which is like, how do you get there? And that involves explicit teaching versus implicit. And that's what sports is right now, implicit teaching. Implicit teaching in educational terms means without causation, unintentionally. Like if I watch you dig a ditch, I learn things. It's not, I'm not meant to, I just observe. Mm-hmm. Somebody in neuroscience has explained it, that it's like, who is an educator, explained that it's like baking a cake. So you see a cake and implicitly you learn all of these things about it, the taste, the way it's shaped, the frosting, all of the consistency, all of that. That's implicit learning, you just observe. Explicit is teaching you how to bake the cake. So what we're seeing, SEL is, which I've been involved in for quite some time now, is about explicit learning. It's about intentionally learning how to do something. Like today and every day throughout the season, we are going to learn how to create positive, safe, and supportive environments and how you do that. And then you'll be able to use that when you go to work, because everyone will value someone who is able to do that, among others, like the focus and effort and goal setting, and other things, all are great for later use. So we're suggesting explicit, including emotion management, is necessary. All these things are popping in my head, so I'm sorry if I'm rambling.
Well, I'm just thinking, I want psychologists in every school for every age. Maybe we want them on every team as well.
Well, in a Pollyanna world, that's possible, but in the moneyed world of fiscal responsibility, it's not possible. But sports could be a resource for school psychologists, who, by the way, support this legislation that we have. By the way, if anybody cares to look at it, if you go on endabusivecoaching.org, endabusivecoaching.org, under problems, under legislation, under advocacy, it has both the legislation and those who are in support of it. Currently, I've just been working on it. It just was filed in January, so I'm still working and getting members familiar with this concept that changes the way sport is.
I don't want to say that it's just theoretical, like, no, it would never work. There are people like me that volunteer and want to help and would be a part of things and aren't asking for a salary. Colleges and NFL, like colleges and pro leagues pay. I don't want our kids suffering.
Yeah, well, there's a regular rejection by that I find. I don't know, I have no scientific data to support this, but it's my observation of many years that schools don't like to have commissions. Like during COVID, our mayor in my town was resistant to having the amazing medical community in the place I happen to live in getting any involvement.
Colorado is awful, god awful. Midwest has far better mental health. I don't know what to do to change it and have it everywhere, but that doesn't mean there aren't people willing. It's not a numbers thing. It's certainly not we're demanding money to do it. The government, state of Colorado is part of the problem here, but it's certainly not teachers who are unwilling to have the support in their schools. And I don't know that it's principals unwilling either. And parents, go to your PTAs and go to your boards and write to your legislators, because you want the help for your kids as well. There is a problem in certain states legislatively, and our hands are tied, because when I first moved from Michigan, I was like, oh my God, I'm moving to the state where Columbine happened. At that time, it was a rarity. Mass shootings weren't happening every single day. And I was like, I get to go to these schools and I get to walk in and volunteer. And they were slamming the door in my face day after day after day, to the point that I was like, they don't want me here. Like, I can't keep trying and having them tell me no when there's other places that want me. Now, would I love to? 100%. These kids are suffering. So parents, literally, it is the superintendents, it is the board. I truly believe the board has power and the parents have power, but it is not that there are professionals saying, unless you pay me, I'm not willing.
Well, in Arizona, they just published a guideline from the Department of Education here for parents called Empower, where you've seen inappropriate teaching. And they've specifically mentioned social emotional learning is inappropriate. And I have a theory that it's around what it teaches, which is kindness, respect, inclusivity. And these things are not wanted by this particular Department of Education commissioner who is elected, which is, in my opinion, a big problem because what are they elected? There should be professional educators who are running that department. And the culture wars have, invaded it. But there are a lot of states where it isn't, and I believe that the long arm of history will, Martin Luther King said that wonderful statement: "The arc of justice moves slowly." I'm butchering his wonderful words.
Yeah, but let's work together. If you're listening, if you're in a place that isn't working well, find somewhere that is and start doing TikTok. Whatever your generation does, let's do it together, because I'm sick of it.
Well, this is why we started endabusivecoaching.org in an attempt to gather people and tell their stories, which is available to put into our chat. You can see those that have put it in. We haven't really publicized that part yet. This is part of my effort to do that, this podcast. But advocacy, if you go on that page, it shows you how to advocate. And the first thing to do is find allies. That's the very first thing. If you can get a group of 10 who agree with you, now you've just multiplied that, because they all have their own connections where they can find allies. And that's how I built the Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts. I found allies. Because it's so new, this idea of adding a curriculum to sports teams doesn't have a lot of allies. We have to convince and make our allies first. It's a slow process, but in 2000,
got one here in Colorado.
Yes, that's SEL for Colorado. Yes, the whole idea of advocacy is a slow buildup. It's not instant success, and to have it actually succeed is a building block mentality. First do this, for that, and that's what this legislation in Massachusetts is about, which would set a tone, I think, for the whole country, because people look to Massachusetts for that reason, as to being really progressive, and that is it goes to the this is part of being 76, losing your train of thought. So I apologize to your listeners. We started End Abusive Coaching to get people as a central place in order to speak out together, have a central place, have a voice, just like Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts grew that way. What I was going to say was, now I remember, is that in 2011, our Department of Education published guidelines for the implementation of a social emotional learning curriculum in schools already. They did that in 2011. It was no mandate, but school district by school district started to pick it up. And it just, in the last 12 years, it just mushroomed all over the state, because people realized that people's mindsets have to be right before they can achieve anything. So the same way, this legislation is to publish a guidelines for the implementation of a social emotional learning curriculum, but on sports teams. And that's the difference. And it would use sports as a resource in this mental health crisis we're certainly having. But even before the pandemic, the amount of attempted suicides in schools, if people go to their own town and put youth behavior risk survey, every town generally does it. It's a CDC instrument, and you will be shocked at how many people attempt suicide. And it's not something people would readily admit. Of course, it's an anonymous poll, but it's filled out extensively. In my town of Newton, Massachusetts, there was last year 120 children out of 4,000 in high school that attempted to kill themselves. This is just shocking, really. Across the country, it's just as bad, and we need all hands on deck. And sports, instead of actually causing more mental problems for many people, um, the it would help people to understand what the coping skills actually are, and learning about meditation as a form of really understanding thought. One neurologist, I forget her name, a neuroscientist, said we perceive ourselves as thinking creatures who feel, but in biology, we're actually feeling creatures who think.
I love that.
And I know, I do too. I've remembered it. I wish I had such a good memory that I could remember the
name.
person who sent it. But point only is that the first things that we react to are emotional. That's the first part of the amygdala, the emotion center, is the first thing that fires up in the brain. When you met me this morning, or vice versa, immediately there's an emotional connection. And then we start going to the frontal cortex and start thinking about what we're doing. So emotion is life. And how we deal with it, as many people have said, is the real trick. Sports would be a great place to model this behavior for not only the whole school, but the whole community, especially if we added communication skills to the job descriptions of athletic directors. And also in terms of getting out in the stands and saying, we don't allow negativity in the stands. We'll ask you to leave. This is what we're teaching. Here are the skills. And if you can't abide by them, you'll have to leave the gym. That's a courageous leader, not one who's so scared of the few people who yell that they take action. And that's what, on my LinkedIn page, I've gotten like a huge number of impressions on on a statement, and my wheel of what it would look like, what coaching will look like, because that's what I say. Leadership is necessary when we're at a precipice.
I am a child when it comes to being around aggression. And when you go to sporting events, it's there. It just happens. There are people drinking and acting a fool. And so I'm from Detroit originally, the Detroit area. Unfortunately, that means I grew up going to the Lions games with my dad and my brother. And my brother loves this story that there was going to be a fight. And like I was security like so fast because I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be around it. And I pictured we had seats in the front row of the upper section. Like I pictured my dad going over, and there's these just drunk idiot football fans. And we're all idiot football fans, but you add people drinking. And I just pictured somebody going over the ledge.
Yeah, no, I think that has happened, but I think if the drinking part, the alcohol abuse, really puts a focus where obviously there should be focus on that, but not in regards to sports. This actually has nothing to do with drinking. This is this competitiveness that be a winner. I mean, I'm a winner, like, why is that important? Or winning, I remember that from years ago where I guess Charlie Sheen or some actor got picked up on that. Point is that winning is not talking about it. That's number one. But it's great to be competitive. But if it becomes everything, then it becomes obsession. So it's like all things, everything, my grandmother used to say, and I have to say, I have not been good at keeping this adage. It's everything in moderation, Mitchell, she would say. I've not been good with that. But But in this, it's absolutely required. And I'm sort of like you, if I see an altercation, unless somebody's being hurt, I'm not going to get involved in it. The yelling or the screaming and all of that. It's about people. It's not about what drugs they take. It's, the drugs they're taking, whether it's alcohol or any other. It's about them. And, it's like I used to say to a player, well, a team that I coached, we were in the finals of something. I can't remember. I've coached so many teams, but it's us versus us when we play. There's nothing to do with the opposition except in how you match players up and things like that. Some strategic thing. It's nothing. It's how well, I always ask players, how well will you be able to execute what we practiced? If you do that, our likelihood of winning goes up. That's it. We don't promise wins, but we know that if you can do what we practice, we're going to play at our best, which is all anyone can ask for. So I think that's the way to focus on winning. Give yourself the best chance to, and the best chance that you have to winning is when you learn how to focus, which again is teachable under social emotional learning through meditation and learning your thoughts come one at a time, and that you actually have power over them to make changes, and learn to meditate on your breath and then substitute the coach's voice for your breath, and then go to classroom and practice it. Kids always laugh. I said, I know you hang on every word the teacher says in school. They're all laughing. And but you can practice focus by noticing when your mind is distracted and then bring it back. And then during a game, you'll be distracted, especially if you're thinking, oh, I'm winning, I better hold the lead. This is a distraction from doing what we execute. And so I've done this with teams, and 3 times on this one team, they've asked for a meditation timeout when they started to lose the lead they had.
I love that.
They asked the coach, it's time for a meditation timeout.
I love that so much.
And everybody refocused, and they came in on 2 of the times. They came back and asserted themselves and actually won those games, even though they were fast. They were about to lose. The 3rd time, the coach said, well, the 3rd time we lost anyway. I said, what happened? He says, meditation can't beat talent.
I was waiting for a pause to go. We do have to learn to lose. Failing is a part of life. It's a teachable situation. Absolutely. And losing can be fun. There are lessons that we need to learn from it. And I think that if we only practice winning and we don't practice how to lose and how to lose gracefully and how to get back up after we lose, we aren't being a good coach.
It's true, but I have to say that losing is never fun if you're a competitive person. It doesn't have to be fun.
Mistakes can be fun. Losing is never fun. Mistakes can be fun. I grew up and I was so focused on everything having to be right that I didn't learn until now that I can laugh at myself. I can have fun with the mistakes.
Yeah, and that's true. I think you brought up a point that's very good, is that on the college team, I was assistant. I handed out goal books, little spiral notebooks that you can hold in the palm of your hand that you flip over, small pages. And each time I said to them, you have to bring this every day with 3 goals. And we explained what a realistic but challenging, the kinds of goals that are not results, like better defense is not a goal. Get low on defense is a goal because it's a specific thing that you can practice. And when you say having fun with mistakes, laughing at yourself is always good, self-deprecation. But I think if you want to improve, you pick the areas you need to improve, and then you can have fun actually correcting them. And that's where these goal books came in. And if they didn't bring them in, we would run laps. Not as, and as I was saying it, and they would laugh, team, this is not punishment. This is just a reminder to bring your goal books. And they laughed. Seems like punishment to me, but people were laughing, which is the important part. And they did. And once I showed the high school team came in, not a team, the coaches came in to see what I was doing. And they said, can we take a look at the goal books? I said, sure. And the moment they picked them up, the captain comes running over to me. He says, don't show them our goal books. Those are our weaknesses. Those are things that we're working on. We don't want other people to see them. And of course, I immediately told them to put the goal books down. But that's the kind of embracing of mistakes that can happen with a team that is bent on getting better. And so goal setting is a huge part of that, and it can be taught. And again, it's like all things, it's difficult, but goal setting lets us take a step-by-step approach and then pat yourself on the back when you achieve it, like people were crossing out things. I worked at one time with a player on getting low on defense instead of standing up straight where somebody can go right by you because you're not ready. He worked on it all season. He finally scratched it off. One of the few times this team got to the NCAA Division III tournament, and he stood up and a guard went right by him to score. This was at a crucial part of the game. He just looked up at me from across the court with his hands out. How could I forget that? But he's human. That's
Right.
how it happens.
Right.
So, so these are accomplishments, though, that people can really take in, and it's a very positive experience. That's why goal setting is such an art, really. It's a science and an art, because to use it and the way it's intended means you're setting those right goals and not just conclusions. That's what sports today, when you listen to it, we teach the following things: sportsmanship, teamwork, effort, resiliency, all of those are all results. They actually are not what you're teaching. Because if you say to any person who says that, or organization, because they're all about educational athletics, the state associations, how do you teach that exactly? They have no answer to that. There's no answer to that because they don't. They just want you to implicitly, embed it in your own personality. And many times it happens, especially with type A's like yourself. In that way, I'm including myself in this group where we want to accomplish things and we're bent and intent on doing it. But that's not everybody, and certainly not most people, and certainly not in youth league. And, my view is if this got into high schools, all of youth leagues would change, because youth league coaches want their kids to play in high school. And if this is what they're doing in high school, they'll teach it. So now you're reaching tens of millions of people yearly on how to understand coping mechanisms, emotion management, relationship building, all of these important things that determine how well you will succeed or achieve in your life. So I'm having fun doing it. It's one of my last hurrahs here. So I'm putting everything I can into it. What's that?
endabusivecoaching.org, correct?
Endabusivecoaching.org. Yeah, rifle through it. The problems and solutions there, I think everyone will recognize. I mean, it's happening everywhere, the abuse and also these negative cultures. But on a more subtle level, we're missing opportunities of teaching instead of using coaching as a, like a Newt Rockney, Alonzo Stagg, 1890s view of sport. It's fun to win. But at this stage, at 2023, we need to modernize our public school athletic systems. I'm glad to say that this bill was filed by our state Senate Majority Leader, which is a big plus, as well as a state representative jointly. But there's attraction to this idea of merely presenting an alternative to the current method. And that's what we're for. And we think school districts will eventually see it, especially when the liability insurance people say, you should be doing this. Actually, we'll have an answer when people say, what have you done to supervise? We actually have a plan now. So it's a positive for school districts, just from a financial point of view, but also look what they're teaching kids. It could be a model. The first people who are doing it are always going to get the notoriety. So jump in.
Thank you so much for making time and having such an important conversation. Everyone listening, check out endabusivecoaching.org. This was a great conversation with Mitch Lyons. Until next time, always be ruthless. Thanks so much for listening today. Your support means everything to me, truly. If this podcast resonates with you, please do me a favor and join in the Ruthless movement by making some noise and doing one of these 4 things. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Tell a friend so we can break stigmas even faster. Leave a review so people can see what you think of the show. And last, if you want to learn more about me and be a part of the Grief Hab community, please head on over to the Facebook group. We'd love to have you. Thanks again for spending your time with us, and see you next week.